We found a VHS tape after my dad died. What it showed still haunts me. It smelled like dust and decay. Like a forgotten corner of my mind I hadn't wanted to visit in years. That was my dad's attic. After he passed, Mark, my older brother, and I drew the short straw, attic duty. Dad wasn't exactly a hoarder, but he held onto things. Every Christmas ornament since 1972. Yellowed newspapers announcing historical events no one remembered. Boxes of old tools that probably hadn't seen daylight since he bought them. And then in the back, tucked behind a stack of moth-eaten blankets, we found it. A rusted metal box. Think it's got his porn collection. Mark quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Death made him uncomfortable. Humor was his shield. I rolled my eyes, doubted. Dad wasn't exactly the risque type. Inside the box, nestled in a bed of crumbling foam, was a single VHS tape. No label, just a plain black cassette. "What do you think it is?" Mark asked, turning it over in his hands. "Only one way to find out," I said, grabbing it. We dragged the tape downstairs and dusted off the old VCR in the living room, a relic Dad had stubbornly refused to replace. The fuzzy blue screen flickered to life and we popped in the tape, static for what felt like an eternity. Then a grainy, shaky image swam into focus. Woods, dark, lit only by flickering torches. The date stamp in the corner read 1988. A group of figures, cloaked and hooded, stood in a circle. They were chanting something, a low, guttural drone that sent shivers down my spine. The camera wobbled as if whoever was holding it was nervous or scared. Then I saw him, on the edge of the circle, younger, thinner, but unmistakably Dad. His face was obscured by the shadows of the hood, but I recognized the set of his jaw, the way he held his hands clasped in front of him. He was chanting along with the others. My breath caught in my throat. "Mark," I whispered. He was already staring, his face pale. "That's Dad." The ritual continued. The chanting grew louder, more frenzied. The camera zoomed in on a makeshift altar in the center of the circle. On it lay something. I couldn't make it out. It was covered in a dark cloth. Then the chanting reached a fever pitch. The cloth was pulled away. I recoiled. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. It was a doll, not like a child's toy. Though it was crude, made of twigs and mud, with buttons for eyes and what looked like strands of hair glued to its head. The figures began to pass the doll around the circle, each one touching it, whispering to it. When it reached my father, he held it reverently, his lips moving in silent prayer. And then in the background, something moved. A flicker of darkness at the edge of the woods. Too tall, too thin. It was just a glimpse, a fleeting shadow. But it was enough to make my skin crawl. The chanting stopped. The figures turned towards the woods, and the camera, shaking violently, turned with them. That's when I saw it. It wasn't clear. The image was too grainy, too dark, but it was there. A tall, gaunt figure, its face obscured by shadows, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The tape cut out, static. Mark was silent, staring at the blank screen. What the hell was that? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. "It's just a prank," I said, trying to sound convincing, even though I didn't believe it myself. Some kind of weird performance art thing. Mark shook his head. "No, that felt wrong. You saw that thing in the woods, right? That wasn't human." "Mark, don't." I knew where this was going. Mark had always been drawn to the strange, the unexplained. He devoured paranormal shows and conspiracy theories. I was the rational one, the skeptic. "We need to find out what this is," he said, his eyes gleaming with a manic energy. "Find out what?" That Dad was in some kind of cult. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "I don't know," Mark said, "but we have to. For Dad, that's how it started, our descent into the darkness. The symbols on the altar," I started there. A few hours of frantic Googling led me to obscure websites about occult practices in rural Pennsylvania. One symbol, a spiral inside a triangle, kept popping up. It was associated with a town called Silent Hollow. "Silent Hollow," Mark repeated, leaning over my shoulder. "Never heard of it." "It's isolated," I said, reading from the website, deep in the Appalachians. "Apparently it has a history of strange occurrences, disappearances. Mark's eyes widened, like people vanishing. "The website says the town has a closed-off community. Outsiders aren't welcome." "Perfect," Mark said, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Road trip." Emily, Mark's wife, tried to talk him out of it. "This is insane, Mark. You're basing this on a creepy old videotape. And some website?" "I need to know, Emily," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "I need to understand what Dad was involved in." Emily just sighed and shook her head. She didn't understand the pull, the gnawing need to uncover the truth. I did. Silent Hollow was just as the website described, isolated. The drive there was a winding, treacherous road through dense forests. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The town itself was unsettling. Dilapidated buildings lined the main street. The few people we saw stared at us with open suspicion. Their eyes were cold, unwelcoming. We stopped at the only diner in town, a greasy spoon with cracked vinyl boots and a lingering smell of stale coffee. An old man sat at the counter, nursing a cup. He was hunched over, his face hidden beneath a worn baseball cap. "Excuse me," I said, approaching him. "We're looking for some information about the town." He didn't respond. "We heard there's a history here," I continued. Strange things, he finally looked up. His eyes were milky, Rumi. You shouldn't be here, he croaked. We just want to understand. Mark said, stepping forward. Our father, he used to come here. The old man's eyes narrowed. What's your father's name? David, I said. David Harding. The old man flinched. Harding, he muttered to himself, then looked up at us, his eyes filled with a sudden, chilling awareness. You need to leave, now, before it's too late. Too late for what? Mark pressed. He shook his head. They don't like outsiders asking questions, especially not about that. He glanced nervously around the diner, as if afraid of being overheard. About what? I asked, leaning closer. He hesitated, then leaned in and whispered, them that dwell in the woods. Before we could ask him anything else, a bell above the door jingled. A man in a sheriff's uniform walked in. Deputy Miller. He was young, with a clean-shaven face and a wary expression. Everything all right here, Hemlock? He asked the old man. Just passing through, Deputy, the old man mumbled, turning away. Deputy Miller turned his attention to us. You folks new in town? Just visiting, I said, trying to sound casual. We're interested in the local history. He raised an eyebrow. Local history? Well, Silent Hollow ain't exactly known for its historical landmarks. We heard some interesting stories, Mark said. Deputy Miller's eyes hardened. I wouldn't go believing everything you hear. He paused, then added, best be on your way. There's nothing for you here. We left the diner, feeling more uneasy than ever. The old man's warning, the deputy's veiled threat. It was clear we weren't welcome. We need to find Hemlock, Mark said. He knows something. I can feel it. It took us hours, but we finally found him. He lived in a small, dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of town. The property was overgrown with weeds, and the cabin looked like it was about to collapse. We knocked on the door, no answer. We tried again, still nothing. Maybe he's not home, I said, starting to lose hope. Mark tried the door handle. It was unlocked. Mark, we can't just go barging in, I protested. We don't have a choice, he said, pushing the door open. The cabin was dark and cluttered. Bookshelves lined the walls, overflowing with dusty volumes. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and mothballs. Hemlock was sitting in a rocking chair in the corner, his back to us. He didn't turn around, Mr. Hemlock, I said. He didn't respond. We approached him cautiously. As we got closer, I noticed something strange. He wasn't moving. Mr. Hemlock, I repeated, reaching out to touch his shoulder. His body was cold, stiff. He was dead. Mark cursed under his breath. Great, now what? I scanned the room, my eyes darting from shelf to shelf. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Then I saw it. On a table near the window, a photograph. It was old, faded, but I recognized the figures. The cloaked figures from the tape, and in the center the altar. But this time the image was clear. The altar wasn't just holding a doll, it was holding a heart. A human heart. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back, gagging. Mark grabbed the photo, his face paling. Oh God, suddenly a floorboard creaked behind us. We whirled around. Deputy Miller stood in the doorway, his face grim. He held a gun in his hand. I told you to leave, he said, his voice low and menacing. We didn't do anything, I stammered. We just found him like this. You're interfering, he said, ignoring my plea. You're stirring up things that are best left buried. What things? Mark demanded. What were those rituals? What was my father involved in? Deputy Miller's eyes narrowed. Your father, he made a mistake. A big one. What kind of mistake? I asked, my voice trembling. He brought something here, Deputy Miller said, his voice barely a whisper. Something that should have stayed buried. What are you talking about? Mark yelled. Deputy Miller raised his gun. You need to forget about this. Forget you ever saw that tape. Forget about your father. He aimed the gun at Mark. No, I screamed, lunging forward. The gun went off. I didn't feel anything at first. Then a searing pain ripped through my arm. I stumbled back, clutching my wound. Mark tackled Deputy Miller, knocking him to the ground. They wrestled for the gun. I scrambled back, trying to get away. I knew we had to escape. We had to get out of Silent Hollow. Mark managed to disarm Deputy Miller. He stood over him, the gun in his hand, his face contorted with rage. Mark, don't, I cried. Don't do it, he hesitated, his hand shaking. Then he lowered the gun. Get out, he snarled. Get out of here and never come back. Deputy Miller scrambled to his feet and fled. We didn't wait. We ran. We ran through the woods, back to the car, back to the road. We didn't stop until we were miles away from Silent Hollow. Back at my father's house, after bandaging my arm, Mark looked at me, his face haunted. What was that about? What did Deputy Miller mean my dad made a mistake? I told him what happened, what I overheard the old man Hemlock say, them that dwell in the woods. We're missing something, I said, pacing the living room. There has to be a connection. The tape, my dad, the rituals, Silent Hollow, it all has to fit together. That's when Aunt Carol called, Dad's sister. I hadn't spoken to her much since the funeral. She was always a bit distant, a bit strange. Sarah dear, she said, her voice sounding strained, I heard about your trip to Silent Hollow. My blood ran cold. How did you? It doesn't matter, she interrupted. What matters is that you need to stop. You're playing with things you don't understand. What do you know about it, Aunt Carol? I asked, my voice hard. She sighed. More than I care to admit. Your father, he was involved in something very dangerous a long time ago. Something he tried to leave behind. The rituals, I said. The tape, yes, she said. It started in Silent Hollow, a group of misguided young people searching for something beyond the mundane. They got involved with forces they couldn't control, and my father was one of them. Yes, she said, but he realized his mistake. He tried to stop it. He tried to protect you. Protect us from what? She hesitated. From the figure in the woods, my heart pounded in my chest. What is it? It's an entity, she said, an ancient presence that has been drawn to Silent Hollow for centuries. It feeds on fear, on darkness. It corrupts those who come into contact with it. And my father, he brought it home. Not exactly, she said. He contained it. He performed a ritual to bind it, to keep it from harming anyone. But the ritual, it wasn't perfect. It needs to be maintained. Now that he's gone, it's getting stronger, Mark finished. Yes, she said, and it knows about you. It knows you're investigating. It won't let you get away with it. What do we do? I asked, my voice trembling. You need to destroy the tape, she said, and you need to leave it alone. Forget about Silent Hollow. Forget about everything. But what about the ritual? Mark asked. What about containing the entity? It's too late, she said. There's nothing you can do. Just protect yourselves. Please, she hung up. We stared at each other, our faces pale with fear. She's lying, Mark said. There's more to it than she's letting on. Maybe, I said, but what if she's right? What if we're making things worse? We can't just give up, Mark said. We owe it to Dad and to ourselves. We destroyed the tape. We burned it in the backyard, watching as the plastic melted and the images faded to ash. But it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like an invitation. A week later, I was in the backyard watering the flowers. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. Everything felt normal until I saw it. Carved into the trunk of the old oak tree in the corner of the yard, a spiral inside a triangle, the symbol from the tape. I gasped, stumbling back. My heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't alone. I could feel it, a presence, watching me, waiting. I ran inside, slamming the door shut. Mark was in the living room, reading a book. What's wrong? He asked, seeing my face. The symbol, I said, my voice trembling. It's in the backyard. He stared at me, his eyes widening. We went outside, armed with a flashlight and a kitchen knife. The symbol was still there, clear as day. As we stared at it, we heard a sound, faint at first, then louder, chanting, the same chanting from the tape. It was coming from the woods behind the house. We froze, listening. The chanting grew louder, more intense, and then we saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the woods. Tall, gaunt, its face obscured by shadows, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. It raised its hand and pointed at us.